Nuclear Engineering's weekly colloquia. Today it's a real pleasure to be able to introduce Jessica Lovering. She's going to be speaking on nuclear power and the broader climate and energy debate. And she's a senior energy analyst at the Breakthrough Institute. It's always fun to go to the Breakthrough's website and see what the current things that they're working on are. They, of course, have done wonderful things with respect to helping to educate the public and also policymakers on nuclear energy and things that we can do to make nuclear energy more attractive and increase the role it can play in the future. So, as I mentioned, she's a senior energy analyst at the Breakthrough Institute, which is a nonprofit think tank based locally here in Oakland. Her research focuses on nuclear power's role in mitigating climate change and powering modern economies. In 2013, she co-authored the report, How to Make Nuclear Cheap, which is a good thing to figure out how to do, which analyzed the potential for advanced nuclear design to improve the safety and economics of nuclear power. Her analysis for the Breakthrough Institute has included research into national decarbonization scenarios, global energy trends, nuclear innovation, and the climate effects of nuclear power phase-outs. Jessica earned her MS in Environmental Studies from the University of Colorado Boulder with a focus on energy policy. During her last year of school, Jessica created and taught a graduate course on nuclear energy. And with that introduction, I'll turn things over. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. I want to thank Karen for inviting me to speak. I really enjoy talking about Breakthrough's nuclear work, and I especially enjoy discussing it, so I welcome any questions, interruptions as we go. Very happy to answer questions. I also wanted to point out that I'm a proud Cal alum. I graduated with my bachelor's in astrophysics in 2006, so very happy to be back.
Another physicist.
I did try to leave physics and go to environmental studies and kind of got pulled back into energy and nuclear, so very happy to be back in Berkeley. I was going to give a warning that I have a flight to catch tonight, but it's been delayed by 2 hours, so I'm happy to stick around and answer questions, talk to people about anything. All right, so as Per mentioned, I work at a nonprofit think tank called the Breakthrough Institute, and it's very small, and a lot of people haven't heard of it, so I thought I'd give a really quick summary of what it is. Really quick, how many people have heard of the Breakthrough Institute? Okay, maybe it's not us, but 1 minute. So it was founded in 2007 by these guys at the top, Ted Nordhaus and Michael Schellenberger, and it kind of followed from a really famous essay they wrote in 2004 called The Death of Environmentalism. And a lot of what Breakthrough does is try and reframe environmental thinking to be more modern and more applicable to solving environmental problems that we have today. So in 2008, that's where this picture was from, Michael and Ted were named by Time magazine as Heroes of the Environment. And we've gotten good press since then. So some of the just broad, important work that Breakthrough's done or what we're most known for. There's a book called Breakthrough which summarizes how we're trying to modernize environmental thinking. A lot of what we're known for now is our work on shale gas, which is a history that we wrote about the important role that the government played in commercializing hydraulic fracturing technology. And a lot of our work more broadly looks at how the government plays a role in supporting R&D and innovation and commercialization of new technologies. We got a lot of press in the last 2 years because Michael Schellenberger was featured quite prominently in the documentary Pandora's Promise, which came out in 2013. And that movie was about traditional environmentalists who came to support nuclear power over time. So I will just point you to our mission statement, which is still really important to us. So Breakthrough's mission is to accelerate the transition to a future where all the world's inhabitants can enjoy secure, free, prosperous, and fulfilling lives on an ecologically vibrant planet. That is still where we are. So just to say now in 2015, Breakthrough has grown quite a bit. We have a very large network of senior fellows, which are mostly academics that are aligned with us or whose ideas we really like. And we also have a very successful summer fellowship program where we get grad students or people right out of undergrad to come and work on policy research with us. And now we have about 60 Breakthrough Generation alumni, so this good network of young thinkers. We also have a small staff that works on doing the actual day-to-day kind of research and analysis that we need to support our kind of bigger narratives. Okay. So really quick on what I do at a think tank and what my work is. So I started at Breakthrough in 2012, and I was hired to be the nuclear person. So Breakthrough had started coming out as pro-nuclear, or at least supporting nuclear for climate change reasons before that, but we didn't really have anyone in-house that knew anything about nuclear power. And when I was hired, I didn't know that much about nuclear power. I did teach a course that was interdisciplinary look at nuclear power. But when I came, most of my work, it was a lot like starting a PhD. I just did a ton of reading. I interviewed a ton of people to kind of get us a good background on all things nuclear. So now what I do is mostly write reports. So the parent should have a report called How to Make Nuclear Cheap, which does look at how to drive the cost down, especially the capital or the upfront capital cost of nuclear. But it's also a very good, in my opinion, evaluation of all the advanced nuclear technologies that are out there. So it's especially good for non-technical people. A lot of journalists have really enjoyed keeping it as a reference whenever someone says, oh, we're building a molten salt reactor. They can go to it and be like, what is that again? Because there's a lot of advanced reactors out there which are really cool, but kind of hard to explain all the differences to people. So a lot of what I do is give talks, normally to more environmental groups, trying to tell them about the benefits of nuclear power, and also to a lot of nuclear organizations in terms of what we've uncovered on better ways to do innovation and better ways for the government to invest in R&D. And sort of what I've started doing now, this is the last thing here, is global decarbonization scenarios. So I went to, Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project is a UN project in preparation for COP21 in Paris, which is the next big climate negotiation, which people are putting a lot of hopes into. So the UN did this project to write these scenarios country by country to kind of prep for that, and I was brought in as the nuclear technologies expert, which I was brought in 5 days before. So they weren't going to have anyone be an expert on nuclear power, which sort of gives you a sense of how they look at it. But I'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is nuclear power and the broader climate energy debate. And just to get started, what people talk about when they talk about climate and energy is mostly this stuff. So 100% renewables, renewable portfolio standards. These are all just kind of the buzzwords, the things that get you published, the things that get you talked, especially here in Berkeley. There's a big focus on Kyoto Protocol, Copenhagen, Paris is now the big focus. Energy efficiency is huge, especially in the Bay Area. Everyone I know that works in energy works at an efficiency consulting firm, it seems like. Energy access is the new thing, or social justice. And in terms of the more mainstream economics, carbon tax or cap and trade, those are all the ways that people kind of look at the climate problem. So what I'm going to talk about today is the stuff that people don't usually talk about when they talk about climate energy. So the obvious one is that a lot of people don't talk about nuclear power, which is surprising to me because, as probably a lot of you know, nuclear provides about 2/3 of the U.S. clean energy, or clean electricity, and about half globally. And if you're trying to get to 100% clean energy, you might want to look at what's already providing the majority of your clean energy, maybe see how you can scale that. But that's not what happens. And I think what's really missing in these discussions is any sort of talk about feasibility. which is a lot of what I bring up when I go to these international meetings on global long-term decarbonization scenarios, is how do you actually do like radical decarbonization of the global economy? We have some good case studies of how it's been done in small regions that give us lessons on how to do it globally, and that's not really talked about that much. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. And I'm also going to focus on something that's missing in a lot of conversations, but something we focus on a lot at Breakthrough Institute, which is poverty. So how do you address the twin issues of reducing carbon emissions and raising the standard of living around the world and raising people's incomes? And I think what I found and what's really surprised me in a lot of these big energy scenario discussions is that there isn't really a good understanding or acceptance of the role that energy plays in economic growth and human development, and the value that reliable, cheap energy has in those spaces. So, scale, speed, cost, land, poverty, those are the things I'm touching on. Okay, so let's dive in. This shouldn't be surprising to you, but it makes a couple points that I want to share. So what I'm plotting here is the percentage of a country's electricity supply that comes from hydro and nuclear. So I've added them together. If a country has any nuclear power, I've colored it green. So most of these countries are hydro. And then what I have on the x-axis is the carbon intensity of the energy supply. So the trend's pretty clear. The more hydro and nuclear you have, the lower your carbon intensity. What's interesting to me, and something that's become interesting in our analysis, is that this is the carbon intensity of energy supply. So that's not just electricity. That's also cars and transportation and industry. And what we found when you're looking at a lot of how countries have decarbonized within a country is that if you have a lot of cheap, clean baseload power, like hydro or nuclear, you tend to electrify more industries. So you electrify heating, you electrify cooking, you electrify transportation, you electrify more industrial processes. So even though nuclear is really only applicable now to the electricity sector, it has broader effects on the energy system as a whole. And if we are going to get to 100% zero emitting energy, you really need to electrify everything. Or work out some sort of synthetic fuels for aviation, obviously. But this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, that I want to say, like, France gets pinged a lot for having really high electricity use per person. As you know, they need to conserve and use less electricity. But the reason they do that is because they've electrified so many things in their country. Since their electricity is 80% nuclear power, it's not a bad thing that they use that much electricity. It's all clean. So that's what we know now, is that if you have more hydro and more nuclear, you have lower carbon emissions. So in theory, we can scale those up. We can get everyone to lower carbon emissions. But that hasn't really happened in the real world. So the reason I lumped hydro and nuclear together is they play very similar roles in the energy system. They're baseload, they're very reliable, they're very cheap over the long term. They both have really high upfront capital costs, but their marginal costs are very low. So what I'm showing here is the global proportion of low carbon energy. And this chart was originally made, or the idea for it originally came from the political scientist Roger Pielke Jr. And he calls it the Great Clean Energy Stagnation. And you can probably see that. But what this shows is, so blue is hydro, green is nuclear, and yellow is non-hydro renewables. And it's mostly biomass and a little bit of wind. So globally, this is what happens in 1965. Now, you'll notice that in the 1980s, there was a huge increase, and you probably don't think of the 1980s as being a great boom for clean energy, and environmentalism. But if you follow that trend, we're on a great track. We're maybe going to go to 40 or 50% zero emitting energy by now. But that isn't what happened. We started leveling off. So starting in the early 90s, which ironically is when climate change became much more of a focus, the global proportion of low carbon energy started to stagnate. And particularly, I started this line in 1997, which is when the Kyoto Protocol was signed.